Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about maybe the most beautiful book I have ever read, and that is The Warhost of Vastmark by Janny Wurts. This is book 3 in her Wars of Light and Shadow series. This is her epic series that's going to be 11 books long when the final book comes out later this year. And if you are looking to get into the series, now is a really good time. The audiobook for the first book, The Curse of the Mistwraith, was just announced recently. That is something that fans and Janny Wurts herself have really been wanting to get done, and it is finally here. You can go ahead and pre-order that now if this is a series you have been holding off because of that. Well, you at least can get the first book. So very quickly, what is this book about? Well, this book picks up pretty much directly after book 2, The Ships of Merior, and we are still following our same main characters of Arathon and Lycir, the Lord of Light and the Lord of Shadows, and basically it is their conflict yet again, how they interact with each other, other people, and just this ever-growing conflict between them and how the world is being shaped by that. So let's go ahead and just jump right into what I really enjoyed about this book, and then we'll get to some of my negatives. And the first thing I have to bring up is the prose, and that is not normally something I bring up. I have mentioned many times that prose is like that extra little thing that maybe gets sprinkled on, but it's not normally something I crave, look for, or is a huge selling feature for me in a book. And Janny Wurts is really, outside of her, it's probably her and Ernest Hemingway who are the only two authors that I care about their prose. And I think in Janny Wurts' case, she really crafts it together with it's just not the prose. It's not just pretty words and flowery writing like purple prose. It is the way she crafts her story with her actual writing. It's not like anything else I have ever experienced before. And so to even separate prose out by itself and not include like the story she is telling with it, I can't do it. So basically, there are some things that happen in this book that are just some of the most beautiful bits of writing I have ever read in my entire life. I have two that come to my head that are like heartbreaking, and then I have one that is just like this visceral, guttural, like destruction. So the first scene that I'm thinking of that I think really highlights this, there is a death, and it's from a character that we don't even really know. We are basically introduced to this character on the forefront of their death. And I remember reading that, and I finished reading that section, and I remember going to bed and talking to my girlfriend and saying, this was one of the most sad and heartbreaking things I have ever read. And yet at the same time, it is absolutely one of the most beautiful things I have ever read. That is the first example. There's another example of a heartbreak between two characters. And once again, I don't know how Janny Wurts is able to do it, but the way she writes these scenes, they make you feel like you're there, that you're a part of it, that it's so real, and that the actions of the characters make sense, and just like they're so heartbroken of what's happening, how they're being torn apart. And it's just another example of this masterful writing she has. And the last one that I think really just shows how brutal this world can be is, it's one of the most brutal slaughterings I have ever read. I mean, it's not like grimdark in the sense of, I think a lot of people would think of a grimdark story, but it's visceral, it's real, it's just, once again, it is heartbreaking. That is one thing I do have to say about this book. It is definitely heartbreaking. There are so many things that just will make you feel very strong emotions. And once again, I think that comes down to the prose and just the way she's able to craft the story with that prose. Now, Janny Wurts, like I said, is probably one of the most beautiful writers I have ever read. She is also one of the best character writers I have ever read. I feel so connected with multiple characters in this book for many different reasons. Obviously, you have the two main characters, Lycir and Arathon. I definitely feel a huge connection with both of them, their struggles, what they're going through, but it's also some of the, I even hesitate to call them side characters, because while they are not like the two at the main forefront of the story, there are so many characters that you really do connect with, especially in this one in particular. It feels like Janny Wurts was finally starting to branch into more characters and really flesh them out even more than she had in previous books. There are some, revelations that characters kind of decide on that just feel like monumentous for the series as a whole. And she's just able to craft all these characters in ways that make them feel real, and they don't always all align. They don't always think the same thing. It's not like one character is just being copy and pasted over and over again. It is very different characters who are incredibly flawed in so many different ways that she is just able to make them come alive. And I think that is just so well done. I don't know if I've read another author who has been able to craft characters in the same way in this short of amount of time. I mean, it's only been 3 books, and I just feel so connected with so many characters. I also need to mention that A huge positive for me is this is a massive story. Like, the scope of this story is still small compared to where I think it's going to go, and it's already huge. You know, this is taking up an entire continent of a world, and very much feels like, I think Stormlight is going to be, or is already, a massive world. Malazan, I've only read one book, but that is obviously a massive world, and this book in the same vein, or the series is in the same vein. It is going to be massive and huge and elaborate, and I like that. It is definitely one of those series where so much is going to happen. There are so many threads. I already have so many predictions of things that I think are going to happen, and I don't know when they're going to happen. I don't know if I'll even be right, but I think when a series is able to do that, to give you possibilities, to let you use your imagination to think of where it can go, and all of it feels plausible. Like, all the tools are given to you for you to try to figure things out, to guess where the story is going. I think that's a great thing that a story of this scope is able to do. It really does feel like we are just scratching the surface on this tale. I mean, we know from very early on in the series, honestly, the prologue of the very first book tells us that this is a 500-year-long battle between these two, and we are not even, a fifth of the way through that by the time this book is ending. So I can only imagine where this story is going to go and how she is going to continue to build the world out through these characters. So I mentioned how beautiful the prose is and all of that, but I do also just want to mention how these books are actually structured. So there are obviously chapters, but inside of those chapters you get different points of views, and then at the end of those chapters you'll get this very quick, it's normally a couple of paragraphs of things that are going on outside of the characters we are normally getting points of view from. So, and it makes the world feel very real, because in real life you don't just have things happening at points where characters are. There are things going on and moving throughout the entire world, even though you might be looking at just one place. And so the way she's able to just quickly say, hey, this also happened here, this person did this thing over here, that are obviously very important to the plot, but you know, we don't have to sit and get like huge amounts of like info dump and like all of those things that normally come with telling a story. I love that she's able to just like, hey, this person is now here. This person just did this. These people want to do this. It is beautifully and masterfully done. That really helps flesh out this world even more, and it helps build that epic scope that I was talking about. And now let's go ahead and move towards some of the negatives. I don't really have too many negatives. I don't think I mentioned this, but I mean, this was an easy 4-star read for me. This is easily the best book in the series so far for me. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with it, but some things that maybe didn't work for me as well. And the first one isn't even this book's fault. This is definitely like a me thing, and this is just something I kind of want to tell people who are maybe interested in reading the series. This is not a series that I think you can like rush through. Very much in a Malazan way, I had so many people recommend to me to take your time with it, to like really enjoy it and not like binge through it. And that's the same way I feel about this. I feel like this is a series that you have got to just kind of be ready to read and locked in and in the mood for. That's why like these books take me so long to read. I think I started this in November. Now, granted, I don't really read a whole lot in December normally, so that was obviously a slower month for me. But even then, it took me all of January, most of the November, all of December, and all of January to read this book. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing that I'm taking my time with it. I count that as a negative because I want to get through these books because I enjoy them, but I just feel like they deserve the respect of taking your time with. And I will say, for me, they are not the easiest thing to read. And I mean that in the prose is very different from anything you have read. It is very much a one of one. And so sometimes it takes time to get into the gear of that flow and being able to read it. And once you get it, it's fine. But I do think that that is just kind of maybe a warning to some people who want to jump into the series. This is not going to be a popcorn read. This is something you're going to sit with and enjoy, slowly. And now for my real first criticism of this book and the series as a whole. I really feel like the plot of the first 3 books is very much the same. We have a build up to a conflict. The conflict happens. Same thing happens in the second book, same thing happens in the third book, with very similar outcomes in my opinion. I feel like there wasn't any change. I really kind of expected this book to be that curveball, and unfortunately that is not what happened. And so that repetitive nature is fine because there's so much good in here, I almost don't even care. And then the way, this is going back to the prose and the storytelling, Janny Wurts is so good at telling me what's going on and how things are happening that I don't really care that the climax of the book is so similar. One, they're obviously happening in different places, different people, not different outcomes, but just the way things happen is different enough, but it is a little repetitive when you really sit down and are like, what happened? And if you, as simply as you can tell it, the same thing happens in the first 3 books. And I very much thought I was going to get my guesses subverted in this book, and that's not what happened. Not that, like I said, it's not necessarily a huge negative, but it is a little, I don't know, worrisome that we're not getting any deviations from it, at least to me. And my last negative for this book, and once again, kind of the series as a whole, and this actually goes back to the very first book, and I need to go back and really reread that prologue again, because there's a couple different ways I think it can be interpreted, but there is a line at the very end of it that says, and I had to write it out, it says, "Let each who reads determine good and evil for himself." And that line is referring to, this is a look back in history. This series is written after the fact. It is basically, sorcerers have gone back and are looking at the history because they want to know what happened. There is basically a religion that has been set up saying one set of things is true, but there is, evidence that that is not all the case. And so basically this is the tale of people who have looked back and have seen these events. And that one line led me to believe that this was going to be a much more gray story, where both Lysair and Erathon were very gray, and that maybe one did come out on top, but neither of them were necessarily good or evil. And unfortunately, to me, at this point in the series, it really feels like it is more black and white than I would have wanted at this point. It doesn't feel as gray as I would have liked. It really does feel like one is definitely the quote-unquote good and one is bad. And obviously there are circumstances that have made them this way, but I would have liked more ambiguity. And that doesn't mean that the one who is quote good hasn't done anything bad, because they have, but I just would have liked that grayness to be more. Now, obviously, this is 3 books into an 11-book series that is an epic. Like I mentioned, the scope of this story is going to be huge, but I can't look into the future on books that I haven't read and, tell myself now how to feel about it. So right now, sitting here with it, I just feel like I would like more of that grayness, more of that ambiguity of who really is good, who really is bad. And maybe that isn't actually the point. Like I said, I need to maybe go through and really reread that prologue from Curse of the Mistwraith to really understand what this story that we're getting is supposed to be telling us. That is it supposed to be that the religion that won is actually very incorrect, that it's not just truth, but somehow it, is the predominant thing that has been told as the truth. I don't know. That is just a little bit of a negative for me, because I really thought I was going to get a much more gray story than I have been getting, and to me it feels much more black and white. If you have read the Warhost of Vastmark, let me know what you think down below in the comments. I would love to chat with you some, and if you watched all of this and you have not read this book, thanks for watching. Let me know if you are inspired to maybe start reading this series. I think you should. It is a fantastic series, and it is one that should definitely be talked about with the greats like Wheel of Time, Malazan, Stormlight Archive, all of those, Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderling, all of those kinds of books. This series should definitely be involved in it from the 3 books that I have read. But that is all for me, and as always, have a good one.